You know, the internet has been one of those transformational inventions that has changed how we communicate, how we do commerce, how we live our lives. For many, especially young people here, it's hard to even imagine life before the internet. But you look at what the internet has done. It has created an oasis of freedom. One of the great problems with someone trying to start a small business is what are known as barriers to entry. It's often difficult to start a small business because it's expensive. The internet empowers those with nothing except for hopes and dreams to be able to achieve those ambitions. And when it comes to free speech, you know, it wasn't too long ago that speech was controlled by a handful of TV networks, a handful of newspapers. The gatekeepers, they decided what was news. They decided all the news that's fit to print. And if it so happens that they didn't think it was fit to print, that it was inconsistent with their political views, then it didn't get said. The internet is now a place where any one of us can go online and say darn near anything. And I got to admit, I've read some crazy things on the internet. But it's an amazing ability that takes power out of the entrenched elites and brings it to the people. You know, it wasn't that many years ago that Dan Rather was a respected network news anchor, until a bunch of bloggers in pajamas began fact-checking his stories and took down one of the biggest names in news. That could never have happened prior to the internet. That ability to research, to communicate, to get a voice out, to expand virally could never have happened prior to the internet. Now, what do we also know? We also know that whenever there is an oasis of freedom, as surely as night follows day, there will be government regulators who want to get their grubby little mitts on it. That is the nature of government power. To want to control, to tax, to regulate, to make sure that freedom needs the prior approval of government. Right now, the Obama administration's proposal to give away the internet is an extraordinary threat to our freedom, and it's one that most Americans don't know anything about. It is scheduled to go into effect September 30th, 2016. We are not far away. The Obama administration is pushing through a radical proposal to take control of internet domains and instead give it to an international organization, ICON, that includes 162 foreign countries. And that means, as a necessary result, if that proposal goes through, that will empower countries like Russia, like China, like Iran, to be able to censor speech on the internet. These are not our friends.
Everyone who is on the truth wagon, you should be on the lookout, because get ready for some intense censorship that's going to come across your way in a wave that you've never expected it to come. As many of you should be aware already by now, many people, including myself, I have uploaded a video talking about Obama's plan to give the internet away to the United Nations and to be in the hands of international organizations. In other words, into the hands of the New World Economic Order. Now, as of October 1st, 2016, it is now official. The internet has been given away and it no longer belongs to the United States of America. If ever there was a time that you should be angry at your president, now is the time to be angry at the President of the United States of America. Because right now, he has simply signed the internet away, and guess what? They had their own appointed judge to declare this and make it official, despite last-minute bids to prevent this from happening. It is too late. As we go to BBC.com, they've reported this also on the 30th of September. Headline reads, "Bid to block US internet handover rejected." And as I go down, a judge in Texas has rejected a last-ditch legal challenge to halt the final handover of internet naming power from the United States government to a non-profit group. The Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, or in short abbreviation ICANN, has administered the naming system since 1998, but from Saturday it will operate without the ultimate oversight of the United States government. 4 U.S. states filed a joint motion on Thursday in an attempt to block the handover from going ahead, arguing it could disrupt freedom of speech. And I quote, "We're disappointed with the ruling," said Mark Rylander, a spokesman for the Texas Attorney General. Many other news organizations are reporting on this. ICANN has now been handed over to international affairs. International laws are now the ones which are going to be governing this. So get ready for some drastic changes. Going to another news report, Reuters, it reads the following. Internet oversight transfer clears hurdles to take place Saturday. It's already taken place. It's done. It's finished. Fourth paragraph down, it says the lawsuit filed on Wednesday against the federal government by the Republican states of Arizona, Texas, Nevada, and Oklahoma argued the handover was unconstitutional and required congressional approval. ICANN, a California-based nonprofit, manages the database for top-level domain names such as .com and .net and their corresponding numeric addresses that allow computers to connect. After the transfer, ICANN will be governed by a collection of academics, technical experts, private industry and government representatives, public interest advocates, and individual users around the world in what it calls a quote-unquote multi-stakeholder process. Now, for those of you who think, it's okay, I don't think it's that bad, it's just letting the public really pretty much run it and stuff. No, hold up. Here's what I want you to understand. Let me enlighten you on this subject here so you can understand why this is really dangerous. Observe, as we have just read, ICANN will be governed by a collection of academics, technical experts, private industry and government representatives, public interest advocates, and individual users around the world in what it calls a, and I quote again, multi-stakeholder process. The words that I want you to understand is government representatives, and the other term is the public interest advocates. Now, let's look at the definition for these public interest advocates. What exactly does that point to? First thing you should know is that public interest advocates, they simply belong to the public interest groups. What are their definitions? Well, let's read the following. As we Google here, it states that public interest groups simply promote issues of the general public concern. Example, environmental protection, human rights, and consumer rights, etc., etc. Now, when we look at this term here for the public interest group, it is simply just a word that is used to pretty much cover an entire vastness of many different organizations out there that are all under the umbrella of public interest groups. For example, under the human rights umbrella, we can see movements such as religious freedoms or religious movements, religious equality movements, and you've got sexual equality movements or gender equality movements. Then you've got the LGBT movements. Then you've got feminist movement. All of these movements, though they have different skin colors, they are still under the exact same umbrella called the human rights movement. Now, if you've got advocates from these movements which represent any of these movements, their primary concern is going to be that you don't hurt the feelings of those who are on particular movements. In other words, political correctness, which means now you've got people who are highly sensitive. They don't want you to hurt their feelings. They don't want you to speak anything that will make them feel sad or make them feel bad or make them feel like you're judging them and all that mumbo jumbo. They are going to be the ones that are overseeing the affairs of the internet. These are the people who are going to be controlling the internet. In other words, you've got highly emotional and highly sensitive Super Saiyans. Their power levels of sensitivity is well over 9,000. Political correctness paves the way and brings forth a whole new race of super sensitive human beings. And that's what we're dealing with. Their sensitivity level becomes triggered so fast. As soon as you speak against them, or the minute you call something sin by its name and you're not afraid to speak about it, they'll censor you. And they'll look at you and then they'll say, well, what are you going to do about it? And it is interesting how they will say that they're pro-religious freedom and that they're promoting religious equalities all over the place. However, the one religion which actually is not allowed to have freedom is Christianity. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in dreadful days. We are living in terrible times. Though we are living in terrible times and frightening times, we are actually living also in exciting times, because we are going to witness the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, and we are going to witness the end of the world when the Lord Jesus Christ descends from heaven. We are going to be witnesses of all these events. We are fortunate to be the last generation to walk on this earth, because we have the chance to be able to see the Lord himself descend from heaven. We have the chance to enter into the kingdom of heaven. So do not be afraid. Do not allow these times, these moments, these terrible news that you're hearing, do not allow this to scare you. Keep your eyes open and fixed on the Lord God. We are living in those dreadful times where we can't afford to lose our salvation. Keep your eyes fixed on the cross of Calvary. Do not allow the world to be your distraction. Let Jesus Christ be your distraction. Let him distract you from all the cares and all the worries of this earthly life. Allow him to be your distraction, so that you will stay focused on him now more than ever.
From the very first days of the internet, the United States government has maintained its core functions to ensure equal access for everyone with no censorship. So that when you type in a website, it actually goes to that website. Now, the government doesn't monitor who says what. It doesn't prevent people from saying what they might believe, but it ensures when you type in a website, it actually goes to that website and not somewhere else. And yet, that can change. The Obama administration is pushing through a radical proposal to take control of internet domains and instead give it to an international organization, ICON, that includes 162 foreign countries. And that means, as a necessary result, if that proposal goes through, that will empower countries like Russia, like China, like Iran, to be able to censor speech on the internet. These are not our friends. You know, the United States has the First Amendment, an incredible blessing that protects the right of everyone to speak their mind, even if they're wrong, and I would say especially if they're wrong. You know, the First Amendment is not about popular speech. The First Amendment's about unpopular speech. The First Amendment is about offensive speech. That's what it was created for. Look, you don't need a First Amendment if nobody is offended at what you're saying. It is only when someone says, I am offended and would silence you. That's the only time the First Amendment matters. When there are those seeking to use government power to muzzle opinions that frighten them, opinions that threaten their power. I'm very much of the school of John Stuart Mill, that the best cure for bad speech is more speech. But a lot of countries don't share those views. Imagine searching the internet, and instead of seeing your standard search results, you see a disclaimer that the information you were searching for was censored. If you're in China, that situation could well come with the threat of arrest for how dare searching for such a thing. But thankfully, that's not yet happening in America. This transfer from the Obama administration, this radical proposal, could lead to that threat. And Congress has yet to step in and affirmatively stop this. You look at the influence of foreign governments within ICANN. It should give us greater and greater concerns. Do we want control over internet domains in an area where foreign governments can exercise direct influence? For example, ICANN's recently former CEO, Fadi Shehadi, left ICANN to lead a high-level working group for China's World Internet Conference. Mr. Shehadi's decision to use his insider knowledge of how ICANN operates to help the Chinese government and their conference is more than a little concerning. This is the person who is heading ICANN, which we're being told, trust them with our freedoms. Went to work for the Chinese Internet Conference, which, by the way, the Chinese Internet Conference has rightly been criticized for banning members of the press, such as the New York Times and the Washington Post. Two groups that are among my favorites. But you know what? Even knuckle-headed reporters have the right to report and say what they believe. And yet, the World Internet Conference banned them, which led Reporters Without Borders to demand an international boycott of the conference, calling China the, quote, enemy of the Internet. Do you want the enemy of the Internet having power over what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to search for, what you're allowed to read online?